Hi, friend. This is Alex Mcrobbs, founder of the Mindful Life Practice, and you're listening to the Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I'm a Canadian who moved across the world to the Middle East at age 23, and I never went back. I got sober in 2019, and I now live full-time in Bali, Indonesia. I've made it my mission to help other women around the world stop drinking, start yoga, and change their lives through my online Sober Girls Yoga community. You're not alone, and a sober life can be fun and fulfilling. Let me show you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl. I am very excited to be sitting here today with Molly Rugere. And Molly and I have been following each other on social media for what seems like ages and messaging back and forth for a while. So it's really cool to finally meet her. And she is a certified life coach. She's This Naked Mind coach. She's the founder of the CounterCulture Club, which is a global alcohol-free community which offers private and group coaching and a monthly membership for individuals who want to build relationships and socialize without drinking. And she also is a freelance writer, and she has written for a number of local and national publications covering alcohol-free living. So I'm very excited to have you here today. Welcome, Molly. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Alex. Like you said, it's so exciting to finally connect in person. I feel like I already know you so well just for messaging back and forth over the years.
Yeah, it's so amazing. The sober Instagram friendships. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. It's a very small world. I feel like a lot of people, in our sort of age range were kind of coming on social media around the same time to start posting. I think you've been on doing this a lot longer than me, but yeah, I think like Millie Gooch from Sober Girl Society and I kind of started our accounts at the same time. So it's been fun to like be on this path with a bunch of other people all over the world.
Yeah. And I saw that I was looking at your bio earlier, and I saw that you also quit drinking when you were 27 years old, right?
Yeah.
And that's the same as me. I quit drinking when I was 27 when did I quit? 2019. And you quit in 2018, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I didn't realize that we were on that same timeline. That's so cool. Yeah. So we really all were like at the same time, kind of found ourselves on Instagram posting about this, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. So tell me a little bit about your background, your story, sort of pre-sobriety, and what led you to become alcohol free.
Yeah, of course. So my story is pretty boring. It's not boring per se, but it is one that is not super unique. I didn't really get into drinking until I went to college. And so as I was learning to be an adult and live alone for the first time and, meet new people and date, I was also learning how to drink alcohol. And so college, binge drinking in college and all those kind of formative experiences kind of went hand in hand for me. So, I didn't realize until looking back that was sort of how I learned to drink and where I kind of formed some of these beliefs, or at least cemented them with my own experience in college. So, it was really the same as all my friends. It was by no means like moderate, healthy drinking, but it was excused by the fact that it was college. So I would kind of start having blackouts, but my friends and I would always laugh it off, and it never felt like it was an issue or a problem or different than what anybody else was doing. But again, looking back, it definitely wasn't healthy or normal. It's just in comparison to my peers, it appeared as such. So that was kind of the trend that I followed with my drinking in general, because when I discovered alcohol, I've always been an introvert. I've always had social anxiety. And so I discovered this tool that, took that away magically, really quickly. And I could talk to anybody and have fun and like not be counting down the hours so I can go home. And it enabled me to be outgoing and social and talk to guys and do all these things that I had never had the confidence to do before I found alcohol. And, again, I think part of that was just going from high school to college and being in different environments. But, I had always just seen it as such a cool, sophisticated thing as a kid. My family always had cocktail hour, and, no one drank problematically, but it looked very glamorous to me. So it was always something that I associated with being an adult and being, sophisticated. So it was something I always wanted to have in my life. And then I went to college and proved how much I enjoyed it and how much it benefited me. So after college, I moved to Washington, D.C. for the summer for an internship. And at that point, I think my drinking even scaled back a little bit just because I was working full time at an advertising agency and I didn't know that many people. So I just wasn't drinking as much, just by nature. And again, at this age, I was never drinking alone. I maybe get like a 6-pack and have a beer or two, but I was never like drinking an entire bottle of wine alone or anything like that. So then after that internship ended, I moved to New York City on a whim, as only a 22-year-old would do, and moved there with like 2 suitcases and nowhere to live, and moved in with a boyfriend that I got back together with from school. And I had a music PR internship, but I had no place to live and no paying job. So got to New York. I got a job right away in addition to the internship, and Hurricane Sandy hit at the same time. So a lot of crazy stuff was happening. It was a chaotic experience from like day one. I lived with my ex for one day. I moved into an apartment with someone from Craigslist the next day. And then, the hurricane happened a few weeks later. And then I ended up getting a job in luxury travel PR. So that was my very first job in New York City. And I stayed in that industry in public relations and entertainment for the whole time I was in New York. And I hopped from different agencies. So, I was working at Paper Magazine and Fader Magazine and doing these big high profile events that again were like very classy, very sophisticated. Celebrities were there and there was a lot of alcohol. So it was just even more of a big thing in New York than it had been in college, because now there's no rules. Like you can stay out as late as you want. People are out till 4 a.m. in New York City, and drinking more early in the day because you don't drive. And so I also got introduced to other drugs at this time. And so my 20s were just a lot of drinking all of the time and partying and, working and all of that in the city. So again, it was really just primarily a social anxiety reliever and what I did for fun and what I thought living in New York City was all about. So what made my drinking change, it really wasn't until I can point to this traumatic breakup that I went through, that I was experiencing a lot of depression. I wasn't diagnosed at the time, but I was experiencing, a lot of feelings of depression. I didn't like my job. I had a boyfriend that lived out of town, but my life was just chaotic. And like, I didn't have really anything except having fun and going out. Like I didn't have any money. I was like paycheck to paycheck and would blow it all on cocktails and stuff. So we ended up breaking up, and it wasn't directly pointed to my drinking, but I know alcohol was affecting my personality and making me more emotional and causing a lot of fights. So that inevitably, the person I was with just had enough and left, and I never saw him again. And from that point forward, I started drinking to self-medicate. And I had to numb these feelings of like guilt and shame I had as a result of the drinking I was doing. So it was incredibly ironic, and I knew that, but sometimes when the pain is so deep and you can't see beyond the next couple hours ahead of you, you're just like, whatever, I'll deal with this tomorrow. Today, I just want to numb out. So I just kind of repeated that cycle. I ended up having some health issues. Like really quickly, my body just kind of went like, couldn't handle the alcohol. I was drinking like a bottle of wine a night, and that was usually more than that. So I, told my family about it. And now all of a sudden, what I knew was a problem was spoken out loud, and it became real. So then my family kind of got involved and suggested I move back to Charlotte, and where I'm from, North Carolina, and, quit my job and just try and get healthy and stop drinking. So that is what I did. In 2018, I think it was February of 2018, I moved back to Charlotte.
Wow. And what was that like when you moved back to Charlotte? Did you move back in with your family? Were you living separately from them? Like what was that part of your journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I loved going home, especially towards the end of my time in New York, because, it was hard. It's hard living. I didn't have a washer dryer in my apartment. It was always, the winters were brutal. I walked to work in the snow, and I sound like a like 80-year-old grandpa, but I truly was like walking a mile every day into work in the snow and like huge wind tunnels, and like, I was crying it was like a movie. Like it was so melodramatic, crying on the way to work, smoking a cigarette, and like I just wasn't happy. I just wanted to like be in nature and have like creature comforts, and I just didn't have that. All I had was going out. So I was really happy to be home with my parents, and they they definitely pushed me into this decision. I didn't, in a way, I knew what would happen by reaching out to them and asking for help, but I didn't realize like how quickly it would all start falling into place, and like what I was really signing up for, which basically in my parents' eyes was like, I was never going to drink alcohol again. So that part was tough because I didn't fully, my brain was so kind of like all over the place and scrambled that I still, I thought by going home to Charlotte and like taking a detox break, I would feel better. I thought the city and my environment and, drinking and not taking medication, I thought all of those things were the reason that I was miserable. But I figured out quickly after trying to drink a couple times in secret, and my parents finding out, that my drinking habits were exactly the same as they were before I stopped drinking. And like at that point, I realized that I could never have another guilt-free drink again. I like thought those words in my head. And that was when I kind of, without realizing it, deconstructed the belief that alcohol is what makes life fun. Because to me, having to drink in secret and having my family like not approve and not being able to drink in public and hang out with friends, having it be like Molly's, sneaking alcohol again, and having it be like, seen as a bad thing, or like I was sick. I just like was too prideful, I guess, to have that. And I didn't want it anymore. If I couldn't have fun and do it publicly and have cocktail hour with my family, I didn't want to do it. So I just figured at that point, I was like, well, guess I've got to figure out how to make this not suck. And if I'm going to not drink, like how to do this. Cause I clearly like realized I couldn't do it without support. And I'm very stubborn. I've always been very stubborn and like always wanted to do my own thing and kind of go against what my family suggested that I do. So they really pressured me to go to 12-step meetings. My dad was in the program at the time, and I was like, no way in hell, I'm not going to AA. Absolutely not. And I tried to avoid it, and they were like, well, you have to do something, or you have to do this, you have to work on this. And there just really wasn't much else in my city I could do in person. So I ended up, starting out in AA meetings and did the 90 and 90, did the 12 steps, had a sponsor, all of those things, and getting my white chip. And yeah.
And how long were you part of AA for?
So I think it's so funny how everything feels like such a blur at this point with the pandemic, because it was such a huge chunk of everyone's lives. So I think I met my first sober boyfriend in AA. And so I was going to meetings with him regularly. I think it was for about maybe my first year. Mm-hmm. And then, I got it. I found a meeting that I really liked and started going every Sunday, and found a good group of people that I thought I connected to the most. But I really didn't find, there was a lot missing for me in that world. And as someone who kind of questions everything and isn't really a joiner, who can't just like accept something and not, look for more or try to find, I don't take things at face value. I don't subscribe to something just because someone tells me this is the only way. Like, I don't ever believe there's only one way. So, after some time, I just realized it like wasn't working for me. And I realized that there were so many other resources out there. So I was reading a ton of books. I was, at this time, I think I'd already created my Instagram page. I started my Instagram page at like day 200 of my sobriety and wrote every single day until I hit a year. So that was like truly just for me to chronicle how I was feeling each day and post a photo. And that was sort of how I got into the online community on Instagram, and realized there were so many other things that people were doing out there to change their relationships with alcohol. And I didn't have to go to AA, and I didn't have to call myself an alcoholic. And I could figure out what I needed to make me happy and what I needed to work for me. And so, I found the work of Holly Whitaker and Laura McCowan and Annie Grace. And I felt like for the first time, I found people that spoke my language. They were, talking about science and how the brain works and how alcohol is an addictive substance that anybody can get addicted to if they have the right amount of exposure. And, I've always been interested in psychology. So I just got really interested in like reading everything I could and listening to all the podcasts, and just grew my knowledge so much that now at that point, it kind of became a hobby of mine. It wasn't to, stay sober. It was because I genuinely thought it was really fascinating. And so, that was over time, I realized I got to the point where I was no longer, attached to alcohol. I'd slowly but surely, like through experience, built up enough data to show myself that alcohol didn't actually give me the things I thought it did. So once I realized that, it was like, it holds no charge over me, because everything I thought it gave me, I actually cultivated when I stopped drinking. And alcohol was the very thing that was holding me back from actually achieving those things for myself.
So amazing and so inspiring. And I just loved hearing your story because I just resonate so much with it. Like, we both got sober at literally the same age at 27. And I was just laughing to myself, like picturing you just in the tunnels in New York, like with your jacket.
Windy. Crying, smoking. I was listening to, I don't know if you listen to Lorde or if you know Lorde.
Yes.
The musician. Yeah. So her album at that time had just come out. I think it was the one before the most recent one. And it was all about a breakup she had gone through. And so I would like listen to that every morning on my walk to work, and I would cry and smoke and like, stumble in the snow, because it was just like, oh my God, like throwing away my wine bottles from the night before. It was like, I am such a cliche right now. New York City, like couldn't hack it. Going to my PR job.
It's so funny because it's like, it reminds me of like when I was right before I quit drinking, but like literally different environment. Like I was in Abu Dhabi, which should have been like paradise. I'm like driving by the palm trees in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was like in the exact same mental state of like, I hate my job. I hate my life. Like, and it's so funny because that juxtaposition of like me relating to your story, but being in a totally different environment really brings home the point to me, which is like the issue is the substance and the alcohol in the system, because you could be in paradise, or you could be in like what you thought was like your dream city, and be in this state of like, just, I can't cope with everything. And I'm so unhappy in the situation I'm in.
Yeah. You're so trapped in your internal world and your obsession with like either trying to stay away from alcohol or trying to get to the point where you can drink again. Then it's like, when you're not thinking about how much you are, you are mad at yourself for the things you did when you were drinking, you're spending the other time thinking about, well, when am I going to be able to drink again? It is the most painful, vicious cycle ever, that like the exact thing, is literally, in my case, like it was, my liver enzymes were elevated. I woke up one morning and my foot was not working. So I was also in like my friggin' combat boots, stumbling because my foot wasn't like, I couldn't walk properly because I had literally like experienced some kind of nerve damage from drinking. And no doctor even diagnosed that or made the association, but I wasn't asked about my drinking and I didn't offer that information. So on top of all this in New York, I was also running around to specialists, nerve doctors, foot doctors, blood doctors, all these people trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with my foot. But I knew because I'd done my research, but nobody asked. So I didn't tell. And like, I'd go to these doctor's appointments and then get a handle of tequila on the way home. And I knew, like, I was like, the drinking is probably the reason this is happening. There's no other thing I can point to. So
that's so wild to me, because you hear time and time again these different stories of different things happening in people's bodies, like, a physical or mental health thing that it just blows my mind when you think about the quantities in which we drink and it's normalized in our culture, and the amount of mental and physical ailments, like the amount of things that can go wrong in our body when we're drinking so much. And yet there seems to be no education, no link, no awareness, no question from doctors about where
I
that's
was
coming
young.
from.
Yeah. I mean, I did go to one doctor, and, again, I think I've always struggled with depression. I've always been like a very emotional kid, and I've always just kind of broken into sobbing. And so at this time, I was just so emotionally fragile. I'm sure I was sleep deprived. I was depressed. And I went to see this doctor, endocrinologist, the blood doctor, whichever one that is. And the guy actually said to me, they did ask a little bit about my drinking, and I just broke down and cried because I was so ashamed and all that. And the doctor was like, well, if you were older, I would send you up to one of those places in Connecticut. But since you're only 26, or 27, I'm just going to tell you to stick to beer or something like that. And talk to me about like his alcoholic sister or something. And I just think it was like, yeah, there's not enough early intervention. Like I literally did not know that you can progressively get more addicted to alcohol. I thought you were born an alcoholic or you were fine. And so I wasn't paying attention to it. My tolerance went up so high that I could drink a bottle of wine and have like a conversation like this. So, I had no idea that I was just getting to the point where I was consuming incredibly high levels of alcohol, but not even feeling it. So yeah, my body just responded super quickly. I think for other people, it takes like 30 years. And for me, it was just like, I started shutting down. So my parents kind of made the decision for me. Cause even then I was like, I would rather like at that point, just push through so that I didn't have to stop drinking. But more importantly, I did not want to call myself an alcoholic. And it was just like, I didn't even try to moderate really. Like, I was just like, no, I'm not even entertaining that idea because that seems like worse than this. Yeah.
Wow. And so tell me so you said that there were a lot of things in AA that didn't quite resonate with you. And then you discovered like Laura McCowan, Holly Whitaker, and Annie Grace. And this, when you mention them, it's like the like trifecta of like sober women, but I'm wondering, like, so then you went on to create CounterCulture Club, and what elements of like, tell me about that community and what elements of it are, what's the question I'm asking? What did you create that was missing in AA? I guess that's my question.
Yeah. So I created CounterCulture Club around the same time I stopped going to AA meetings. And simultaneously, I was a bridge club leader for Tempest, which is Holly Whitaker's online modern recovery program that she created. And so I got involved with the Tempest community and was writing for them as well. And so I was like kind of launching my own group at the same time as I was bringing Bridge Club to Charlotte. And basically what it was I remember where I was sitting. Actually, I was in my like office and I was sitting there. I think I was journaling, and I was just thinking, I love not drinking. I love how I feel and like all the things I'm able to do. And I was working out and doing yoga 5 times a week, and I felt amazing. But all my friends drank, and I missed the, community of people that understood what I was going through, and people that drink and that haven't been through that experience. Just, they can sympathize, but they haven't experienced that process, or they don't know what it's like to be on the outside and never drinking and have to deal with, your own judgment and the perceived judgment of other people. And so I just wanted to find other people in my community that also didn't drink, but I didn't want to go back to AA meetings just to make sober friends. That didn't feel like genuine, and I wanted something different. I also felt like a lot of what was missing, at least in the recovery communities or 12-step recovery communities in my city, was like healthy lifestyle. Like I didn't see anybody that was living in a way that I wanted to live. It was still, the styrofoam cups with the coffee and the donuts and the cigarettes. And I was like, I am now eating really healthy. I have more energy. I'm exercising. Like I want to be around people that are striving for creating a better life than they had while they were drinking. And like, I wanted to create more abundance on this side of it rather than trying to spend my time resisting, the devil doing push-ups in the parking lot, the disease doing push-ups in the parking lot, waiting for me to like have a weak moment. Like I didn't want to spend the rest of my life talking about alcohol and how I can't drink it. I wanted to, the only way for this to work for me was if I perceived it as a choice that I made, a healthy, positive choice that was changing my life for the better. And I was lucky that it happened when it did. And over time I started to believe that. And so I wanted to create an organization where we focused on how this choice can, cutting back or removing alcohol completely can, benefit anybody. It doesn't matter if you've struggled with alcohol or not. It's not good for any of our bodies. It's, a toxic chemical that we put in our cars, and it causes 7 different types of preventable cancer. And like, even everybody I knew was drinking more than the required or the healthy recommended dose of alcohol. So I kind of just started to see like, this is a societal problem. This isn't an individual problem. Yeah. And I want to change the conversation and like the framing around what it means to be a non-drinker. So I wanted to make a cool, aspirational organization of other women my age that were, removing alcohol, not necessarily because they hit this crazy rock bottom, but because they like wanted a better life for themselves. And to backtrack, I didn't have all that in my head when I started it. All it was at that time was like, I want to make new friends. And so I'm just going to put the call out and see who responds. We're a very big drinking city. I mean, I know every city is. I lived in New York, so in comparison, it's probably not as bad, but we have, over 60 breweries. It's just a huge focus here. And it is kind of known for that. So I was like, if there are that many people in that saturated of a drinking culture, there have to be people on the other end of the spectrum that are sick of that and want something different.
Yeah. And how many people are part of your community now? And what does it look like?
Yeah. So, I'd say I came up with the idea before the pandemic, but it wasn't until August of 2020 that I actually made it into a real business. And again, I like never wanted to own my own business. I did not see this becoming, I certainly didn't imagine it would be my full-time work. I just gradually over time, it was the next step that made sense to be able to provide the events I wanted to do and have the resources I needed. It had to become a business. And so I just kept adding elements to it over time. I added coaching and so, yeah, that's kind of organically how I got to, make it more of a focus for me being a hobby to being like a, really significant piece of my life, something that I was really passionate about and working on a lot.
That's incredible. That's so amazing to think of how it's just sort of not something that you even imagined you'd be doing. And now it's become your full-time work. Like it's incredible. Yeah. And it's amazing just to see all the other sober women in the sphere doing amazing things like you and sending the message in your community that you don't have to be an alcoholic to give up drinking, and that a sober life is fun and amazing. And yeah. I just think it's awesome.
And I'll say, so again, things organically changed sort of as my understanding or my journey changed. So initially when I started CounterCulture Club, it was, just for sober or sober curious women or non-binary folks. Because I very much identified as I am sober. I'd come out of the recovery world. So it was kind of that black and white in a way still. And, over time, and as I started to just pay more attention to culture and the conversations about health and alcohol, I realized that I didn't want this to be a recovery community. I want it to be a social club for anyone that chooses to either they want to drink less or they want to cut back, or they've never drank because they don't like the taste of alcohol. Anybody that is, in that place is going to come against some struggle or some challenges in society because it's just alcohol is everywhere. So we all had that common denominator, but at the same time, we want to do all the things together that you can't do when you're drinking, because who wants to go to a 7 a.m. hike if you were out till 4 a.m. drinking the night before? So it's very much, we are focused on doing all these fun alcohol-free activities together and having like real candid discussions online to showcase, again, like make this an aspirational lifestyle, show people like the amazing, changes you can experience. People are getting promotions left and right. They're buying houses, they're experiencing all these successes. So it's like an incubator for seeing other people thriving and like what can happen when you take out drugs from your life and make them not a priority. So it's just so focused on the positive aspects, and we don't ever really talk about it from a place of deprivation. So frankly, we don't even talk about drinking or alcohol that much. I don't know what every individual's relationship with alcohol is. All I know is they're looking for alcohol-free connection and fun things to do, and they don't want to have to like drink 4 glasses of wine to do it or be the only one not drinking. Because again, there's like no spaces that I know of, at least, that are social and alcohol-free. It's either recovery and alcohol-free, or there might be alcohol there. Like even in yoga studios, they're all at breweries and like, or yoga classes at breweries and things. It's like so muddied. I realized there was just no alcohol-free spaces to be social. So I would say we went from being a kind of sober community at the very beginning to now part of what I would say is my audience is almost non-drinkers as much as it is, drinkers as much as it is non-drinkers, because I want everybody to come out to our events. We do these big, large scale parties, and I want everybody to come and see you can enjoy life and have fun without drinking, and you don't need to drink by default. Like challenging people to kind of get out there and experience socializing alcohol-free in a non-recovery setting and build their own confidence and see that they can, they don't always have to drink just because it's offered. So I'm really trying to like, again, just change the narrative and use this group to do that and merge the two worlds together, because the more we're talking about it and the more that people are vulnerable and sharing their stories, the more we realize that it's totally normal to be uncomfortable with drinking as much as we're all drinking, but nobody wants to talk about it because nobody wants to be seen as the one with the problem.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That just sounds like I want to come to one of your events. It just sounds like you're having such an amazing impact on your community.
Oh, thanks. Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, obviously the bulk of the time with the business, it was during the pandemic. So that is actually why it was supposed to be an entirely local community, but because I knew people all over the world through social, and I ended up being like, well, I may as well just open it up to anybody anywhere because we're all online anyway. So now we have a virtual community and an in-person community. So it's almost like two different things, where the in-person community is really like activity focused, getting together multiple times a week. We have regular events and special events. So we're doing a bunch of like pumpkin picking and some like drink tasting events. We're doing a charcuterie board making class. So we do all sorts of stuff here in Charlotte. And then the virtual community is really, just ongoing online conversation and support and checking in, sharing gratitude lists. It's just kind of conversations and staying connected, and the occasional retreat and meet up in person. So
do you do online Zoom calls?
Yeah. So that's a big part of how we started was having those Zoom calls a couple times a week. And that was really all that we had in the membership for the beginning of it. And we still do them today. So we had people that joined, first month of membership in December of 2020 that are still every week coming to we call them share squares, because they're on Zoom and it's boxed. So it's basically a share circle, an informal discussion. I kind of modeled it after my experience in the meetings in AA, because I loved, I'm a writer. I like stories. I like having I'm also an introvert, so I don't like small talk. So meetings were like a place where people came and were super honest. And I missed that kind of conversation. So that is essentially like our share squares are, again, someone leads it, facilitates it, brings a topic, and we just talk about it. And the topics aren't necessarily about alcohol, but how do you live life and navigate the challenges when you are not numbing out, or when you were kind of living on the outside, when you were living a counterculture lifestyle.
Right. Amazing. So this has been such an amazing interview. I really loved getting to know you and hearing more about your story and your community. I just think the work you're doing is fantastic.
Thank you so
And
much. Same to you.
oh, thank you. And
Yeah.
I have one more question for you. I'm wondering if you could go back to that version of you that was just before you quit drinking and give her any like advice or wisdom or anything you would say to her, what would you tell her?
Yeah. I love this question because there's so much I would tell her. I think, I would tell her, first of all, like the mindset is everything. So rather than seeing not drinking as, losing your drinking privileges, because for so long when I first quit, I felt like I was being punished and this was my fault for like drinking too much and I was missing out on life. I was, again, 27, looking around the meetings, people that were in their 50s and just being jealous that they got to drink longer than I did. So that was my attitude at the beginning. But I would say, put the ego down and focus on like what this removal of alcohol can do for you. And I think at the beginning, it's hard to see that, especially when your brain is still like kind of all over the place. But if you see it as a choice and an opportunity to grow and pursue things outside of your comfort zone and, learn more about yourself and also get healthier and have more energy and achieve your health and fitness goals. Like if you see it as a doorway or an opportunity, then it doesn't feel as ominous and like your life is over. It's kind of exciting and you have to make it exciting. Annie Gray says like positive emotion is the key to lasting change. So shame and guilt are not long-term motivators. So if you are living in that world of I have to do this and like, white knuckling it and using all your willpower, it's not sustainable. So I would just say, look on the bright side. That sounds really cheesy, but reframe it, find the positive and focus on what you're gaining instead of what you are losing, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. And that's a huge insight. And that's key. The whole idea of that mindset, because I'm going through a similar journey related to sobriety right now, just in that I've discovered that I have some food intolerances and had to remove a lot of things from my diet that I never thought that I would ever be able to give up. And that's the total thing I've been thinking about. Think about 2 years ago, I was in a workshop about, giving up sugar. And I was like, I could never give up sugar, and it's because it was a deprivation mindset of like, I need that. I need that. And now I have this mindset of like, no, I need to not have these substances in me so that my mood can be better and so that I can feel better. And it's that mindset shift that has changed everything for me. And so I think that's an amazing just nugget of wisdom to end on, is that the mindset is key.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say that is my main focus with my coaching, and something that's a little different than what the approach that I learned in, traditional methods. You change your behavior first, you go full on cold turkey. And then over time you learn to be happy about it. With my coaching, I don't ask people, per Annie Grace's method, I don't ask people to quit drinking immediately. The most important part is starting with the knowledge and working on identifying the beliefs, and then, having experiences and pulling data to deconstruct those beliefs. Because the idea is, once you change your mindset and look at alcohol differently and realize that it actually doesn't do what you think it does for you, then not drinking is easy because it doesn't hold any power for you anymore. So that, that is the approach that I take with my clients. And I've just, I didn't necessarily start out in that way. So it's been interesting to learn it kind of in reverse, but I've just, I've seen how well this method works. And I just think it not only works as in it helps you quit drinking, but it makes your entire life better. And it's a way that you can now, like, these tools can be used for changing anything you want to change in your life. Not just your relationship with alcohol. So it's helped me to like expand my world and change my automatic negative thoughts and change some beliefs. And so it is just, it's a way to look at the world that sets you up for growth and success and just a better life in general.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, Molly, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. It was amazing to finally meet you and to hear your inspiring story and the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Right. Take care.
You too.
Hi, friend. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sober Yoga Girl podcast. This community wouldn't exist without you here, so thank you. It would be massively helpful if you could subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast so it can reach more people. If we haven't met yet in real life, please come get your 1-week free trial of the Sober Girls Yoga membership and see what we're all about. Sending you love and light wherever you are in the world.